So I guess at the risk of having any dead time on stage, and going first is always difficult because you never know what you're going to say, first of all, and you never know what anyone else is going to say. So what I was fascinated by listening to the other speakers was each of us comes from a perspective of how healthcare has changed and how each of our individual expertise has been brought to an industry that really has changed relatively slowly over the last few centuries. And I'd just be curious across the panel for individuals to comment on sort of the larger revelations in your industry of how healthcare can benefit from these types of expertise. Because again, looking at the building, looking at the people in this room and the types of backgrounds that people are from, there's an awareness that healthcare can learn a lot from other industries. Just running down the pike here.
So, as a nurse and focused on quality, I often speak about the aviation and airline industry and sort of some of the innovation that has happened there. And I know for us in nursing, we're particularly challenged with our current environment. Again, regardless of the technology that's been deployed, the architecture that's been that surrounds us, with some of the basics of just care delivery. And medication administration is a good example where there was a study done where nurses who were giving medications, which is probably the most important task that a nurse needs to accomplish and very critical for patient care, but nurses are typically interrupted a magnitude of 10 to 20 times prior to every single medication administration. So some organizations looked to outside of the healthcare industry to find ways that we can sort of make that process better. And the aviation industry gave us sort of the idea of sort of a no-fly zone or an area of protected, like the cockpit is prior to takeoff. Some organizations have been able to sort of embrace that idea and literally talk about architecture and the sort of the walls of the organization. We'll put a circle on the floor or have the nurse wear a vest that means do not interrupt me, I'm doing something important. I think there's a lot more that we still can learn. I think healthcare, particularly from a health information technology perspective, is lagging behind still many other industries as well. Others want to?
I actually looked to Carrie and some of those groups to help us a lot, because one of the things I find most confounding here when we're dealing with all the vendors is the fact that their vendors are siloed, and they prefer to have a solution that where, so as an example, you buy a certain type of bed. Well, if you buy that bed, you get this type of nurse call with it. If you don't get that type of nurse call, you lose some of the messaging and things like that. So there's just vendors out there that want to stick in these silos. It probably helps them with the immediate sale, but I don't know it's in their best interest long term, and it's clearly not in the best interest of the healthcare systems.
No, absolutely agree with that. We actually see a real need for something along the lines of a centralized lab for healthcare. So if you think about the infrastructure challenges that are shared and the fact that healthcare delivery organizations themselves are not really owning the problem, coming together saying, here's what a common architecture looks like, here's what some agreed upon interoperability standards look like, that the people who have to implement and deliver and use these technologies can actually send back to their vendors. It's kind of like a group purchasing organization, but on a functional requirements perspective. So we are actually looking at avenues for how a centralized lab could help address some of the infrastructure challenges. But I'm not quite sure who made Harry moderator, that's okay. But I do want to give a little bit of maybe a federal government policy perspective on healthcare. I don't know if it's good news or bad news, but agencies are paying more attention to healthcare. And in a sense that agencies that aren't historically thought of as healthcare, meaning not HHS, not FDA, but when a group like the FCC starts thinking about how they're changing their rules, they have new rules out or they're going to be reviewing all the rules on how mobile spectrum is handled. So you think about everything that's wireless in your hospital today, everything that's going to be going wireless, and everything you want to communicate with outside, the rules might be changing. And so it's important for that agency to consider what is the impact on healthcare and healthcare facilities, not just what it does for telco carriers. They're also thinking about how do we use our precious spectrum resource better within the hospital walls. So we see things, I hope some people in here are technical, I'm sure you're far more technical than I am, but small cell architecture that hasn't really been adopted in healthcare, but they're taking a look at it. And the commission is interested in things like wireless test beds. You've got all these new things that you have to integrate into your environment. How do you know that they work? So there are some special things that have to happen with the rules for wireless experimentation that they want to enable, for healthcare. So I think it's good that they're paying attention, but we want to make sure that they get the right input so that the voice of healthcare is coming through, not just the voice of their typical vendor community.
Well, we talk about other industries. I think from a facilities standpoint, most of what you see in buildings like this have taken concepts that have been in hospitality design and have put those into the building. I think for a while, the focus has been on trying to get the consumer to choose us, or to get that physician to choose us, to choose to stay. So from a recruitment, a retention standpoint, and then from a customer satisfaction standpoint. That's what you see in most of the new buildings, is they're focused around all of those satisfaction scores and building environments that are beautiful, they're inviting, that are warm, all by the same time trying to make it efficient and high performance. And so I think it's going to be interesting as you look at the aging of the nursing population, you look at the reduction in numbers of subspecialists out there, is that when you get to a point of having very large facilities that are going to be difficult to manage with fewer staff or older staff or less reimbursement, how it is you're going to be able to do more with less when we've created more around the same numbers of spaces. So it'd be interesting.